The night was heavy with silence. The small house stood alone at the edge of the forest, its windows glowing faintly against the darkness. Inside, the man sat at his wooden table, finishing a simple meal. He lived a quiet life, far from the city noise, far from the endless rush of people. To him, every night was the same, peaceful, predictable, and calm. But that night carried something different in the air, something unseen, like the pause before a storm. It began with a knock, not a loud one, not frantic, just 3 faint taps against the door. The man frowned, lifting his head. He never had visitors, especially not at this hour. He listened carefully, waiting to see if the sound would come again. For a moment, there was only the soft creak of the old house and the distant whistle of wind through the trees. Then tap, tap, tap. Louder this time. His chest tightened. He rose slowly, every step toward the door making the silence feel heavier. What kind of person would be knocking so late? His hand hovered over the handle, his mind racing. Should he open it? Should he ignore it? He almost turned back, but then the knock came a 3rd time, softer now, almost like someone had no strength left. Something about it didn't feel threatening, felt desperate. He pulled the door open. The sight before him froze his breath. A figure stood in the dim moonlight, swaying weakly. At first, he thought it was a woman covered in a tattered cloak. But when the clouds shifted and the light touched her face, his eyes widened in shock. She was not human. Her skin shimmered faintly, pale with a silver-blue glow. Her eyes were large, filled with pain, and her lips trembled as if speaking required every last piece of her strength. In her arms she carried a small bundle wrapped in torn fabric. The bundle moved. A tiny cry rose into the night, thin, fragile, and heartbreaking. It was a baby. The man's throat tightened. He took an involuntary step back, his mind refusing to believe what his eyes were telling him. The alien mother looked at him, her gaze heavy with fear and pleading. Her knees buckled as she staggered forward. He instinctively held out his arms, and in that moment, she pushed the bundle into his hands. The baby's warmth and weight shocked him. The small creature opened its eyes, glowing faintly under the moon, and let out another soft cry. His chest squeezed painfully. He had never held a child before, much less one that wasn't even human. He stared at the mother, searching for words. But before he could speak, her strength gave out. She collapsed at his doorstep with a dull thud, her body crumpling like a leaf in the wind. "Wait!" he cried, shifting the baby in one arm and kneeling beside her. Her breathing was shallow, her body trembling with weakness. She looked up at him one last time, lips moving in a whisper he couldn't understand. Then her eyes closed, her hand falling away. The man's heart pounded violently. He was holding an alien baby. An alien woman was lying unconscious at his door. Fear surged through him. What if someone was chasing her? What if others came? What if keeping them inside brought danger to his home? But then he looked down at the child. Its tiny fingers clutched the edge of his shirt, its cry growing softer as if it trusted him. Something inside him shifted. He couldn't leave them out there. He couldn't turn away. Carrying the baby carefully, he dragged the mother inside. The wooden door shut with a heavy sound, locking out the cold night. Inside, the flickering lamp cast warm light on their strange faces. He laid the woman gently on a rug near the fire and wrapped another blanket around the baby. The cries softened, turning into quiet whimpers. He stared at them, confusion battling with compassion. Why his house? Why tonight? He searched his kitchen for food but froze. What could he possibly feed a child like this? He poured a little warm milk into a small bowl, but fear stopped his hand. What if it harmed the baby? He sat back, helpless, while the child's wide glowing eyes watched him silently. The mother stirred, her lips moving. He leaned close, straining to understand, but her words were broken, her language foreign. Still, her hand reached toward the baby, trembling with need. He placed the child back into her arms, and at once the little one calmed. The bond between them was undeniable, deeper than words. For a brief moment, The man felt like an outsider in his own house. They looked fragile, frightened, yet they belonged to each other. He wondered what had brought them to his door, what danger they were running from. Then it came, a distant hum, carried by the wind. Low, mechanical, unnatural. His head snapped up. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't an animal. It was something searching, something alive with purpose. His blood turned cold. He moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtain. In the distance, faint lights moved between the trees, too smooth, too controlled to be human. His breath caught. Whoever or whatever they were looking for someone. And now, inside his house, he had exactly who they wanted. The man stepped back, his heart hammering. His quiet life had ended in a single night. The woman and her child lay inside, helpless and weak. The sound outside grew closer. He knew the choice before him was simple but dangerous. He could push them back into the night and close his door forever. Or he could keep them safe against whatever hunted them. As the baby whimpered again and buried its tiny head against his chest, he realized something. His choice had already been made. The small wooden house had never felt so full. The man sat near the fire, his mind restless. The alien mother lay unconscious on the rug, her breathing shallow but steady. The baby was wrapped in one of his blankets, resting against his chest. Its tiny glow flickered faintly in the dim light, like a living lantern. He had never seen anything so fragile, and yet so strange. Every sound in the house felt louder that night. The crackle of burning wood, the slow drip of water from the leaky roof, even the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Outside, the faint hum still moved through the forest, rising and fading, as if machines were circling. He kept glancing toward the window, afraid the lights he had seen earlier might return. He had always been alone. He had learned to live in silence, far away from the noise of the world. But now, inside his house, there was life that did not belong to this planet. And for the first time in many years, his silence was broken by the soft cries of a child. The baby whimpered again. He looked down, unsure what to do. Its small hands reached for him, trembling slightly, as though begging for comfort. He rocked it awkwardly in his arms. "Shoo! It's all right," he whispered, even though he wasn't sure if the child understood. To his surprise, the baby's cries softened, its wide glowing eyes fixed on him as if searching for safety. He tried once more to think of food. In the kitchen he found bread, fruit, and milk, but none of it seemed right. What if alien bodies couldn't handle human food? What if he made things worse? Still, he couldn't let the child starve. He took a clean cloth, dipped it in warm milk, and held it gently to the baby's lips. At first, the little one hesitated, then began to suckle weakly. Relief washed over him. At least for now he had found something. When he looked back at the mother, she was stirring again. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly like the baby's. She struggled to sit up but couldn't. He rushed over, helping her lean against the wall. She looked at him with weak gratitude, whispering words he could not understand. Yet her tone was clear, it was thanks. The man pointed to the baby, showing her that it was safe, that he had tried to feed it. Her lips curved faintly, almost like a smile. She touched the child's head with shaking fingers, and the baby cooed softly in response. Watching them, the man felt a sudden pull in his heart. They didn't belong here, yet at that moment, they looked exactly like any mother and child, vulnerable, in need of kindness. But then, the noise outside returned. A sharp hum, closer this time. His body froze. The woman's eyes widened with fear. She reached for his arm and spoke quickly, her voice trembling, though he still couldn't understand. But he didn't need words. He understood her fear. They were being hunted. He moved quietly to the window, pulling the curtain aside by a finger's width. Between the trees, faint blue lights glided silently, moving in patterns. Not torches, not flashlights. Machines. They scanned the ground with thin beams of light, searching. His throat went dry. They were coming closer. He backed away, his mind racing. Should he run? Should he hide them in the cellar? Could he even protect them if those things found his house? He looked back at the woman. She was clutching her baby tightly, her entire body shaking. Her eyes met his, pleading again, begging for safety. He had no plan, no weapon, no strength to fight machines. But he did have walls, doors, and the will to protect them, even if he didn't understand why. He grabbed an old iron bar he used for firewood and set it by the door. Then he dimmed the lamp, letting the shadows fill the room. The fire burned low, casting just enough warmth to keep them comfortable without drawing attention. Hours passed like years. The baby slept at last, its glow fading to a soft dim. The mother drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes whispering, sometimes silent. The man stayed awake, watching the door, listening to every sound outside. The humming moved away, then returned, then faded again. Each time his heart jumped into his throat. Finally, the night deepened. The forest grew still again, the hum vanishing into the distance. But the fear did not leave him. He knew they would come back. Whoever was searching would not stop until they found her. And now, she and her child were inside his home. When dawn's first light touched the window, the man finally allowed himself to breathe. He looked at the two strangers sleeping on his floor. One fragile mother, one tiny child. He didn't know who they were, where they came from, or what trouble followed them. But he knew one thing clearly. If they had come to his door, it meant he was part of their story now. He sat back, exhausted but determined. Last night, he had been a man living in silence. This morning, he was something else. He was the only shield standing between a helpless alien mother, her child, and the unknown danger hunting them. And though fear gripped him, another feeling rose stronger, resolve. The first night was over. But he knew this was only the beginning. The morning light spilled through the cracks of the old curtains, but the man felt no relief. He had not slept a moment. His eyes were red, his body heavy, but his mind refused to rest. All night, he had listened to the hum outside, the strange sound of machines moving through the forest. They had faded with the dawn, but the silence that followed felt even more dangerous. Silence meant waiting. Silence meant they could return. On the floor near the fireplace, the alien mother stirred. She looked weaker than before, her breathing shallow, her face pale. But when her eyes opened and she saw her baby safe beside her, a small sigh of peace left her lips. She reached out to touch the child's head, whispering something in her language, soft and broken. The man watched, not understanding the words, but feeling their meaning. It was love. He turned away, pacing across the wooden floor. Questions circled in his mind like restless birds. Who were they? Where had they come from? And most important, who was chasing them? He had never seen technology like the lights in the forest. They were not from Earth. And if they were searching this close, it meant the danger had not passed. The baby's faint cry broke his thoughts. He hurried to bring water and bread, then stopped, remembering again that human food might not help. He sighed, feeling helpless. Still, the child seemed calmer in his arms, resting its small glowing head against his chest. Somehow, the baby trusted him. That trust burned into his heart, making him feel both stronger and more afraid. The mother tried to speak. Her words were weak, broken, but her tone urgent. She pointed toward the window, then shook her head, her eyes filled with fear. He guessed her meaning. They could not stay in the open. They were being hunted, and the hunters were close. As if to prove her right, a sound echoed from the distance. A sharp, metallic cry that did not belong to any bird or beast of the forest. His blood turned cold. He rushed to the window and peered out. The trees swayed under the wind, shadows stretching long across the ground. First, he saw nothing, but then movement. A shape gliding between the trees, smooth, mechanical, shining under the morning sun. Another hum followed, low and steady, like an engine hidden under the earth. His chest tightened. They had returned. The woman struggled to rise, fear burning in her glowing eyes. She clutched her baby, holding it close as if she could shield it with her own body. The man knelt beside her, trying to calm her, but she shook her head violently, pointing again to the window. He didn't need her words to know what she meant. If those machines found them, there would be no mercy. He thought quickly. His house had no real defenses. The doors were old, the windows thin. If those things decided to enter, wood would not stop them. But leaving wasn't safe either. Where could they run? The forest itself seemed filled with watchers. The hum grew louder, closer. The man's heart pounded so hard it echoed in his ears. He grabbed the iron bar he had used the night before and set it beside him, though deep down he knew it was useless against whatever technology moved outside. Still, holding it gave him courage. Suddenly, a beam of light swept past the window. He froze, pressing his back against the wall. The alien mother gasped, clutching the child tighter. The baby whimpered softly, its glow flickering brighter as if reacting to the danger. He placed a finger to his lips, urging silence. Every second stretched like an eternity as the light hovered near the house, scanning. Then, just as quickly, it moved on. The hum drifted toward the far side of the forest. For the moment, they were safe. But the man knew it would not last. They had been lucky this time. Sooner or later, those machines would come directly to his door. He sat down heavily, running a hand across his face. Fear gnawed at him, but so did something else. Why had the mother chosen his house? Out of all the places she could have gone, why here? Was it chance, or was there a reason? He looked at her again, weak but protective, her arms wrapped tightly around her child. She met his eyes, and in that look he saw trust. She was depending on him. The weight of that trust pressed on his chest. He was no soldier, no fighter. He had spent years in solitude, avoiding the chaos of the world. But now, chaos had found him, and with it came a responsibility he had never asked for. The baby cooed softly, its glow fading back to calm. The man touched its tiny hand, and in that small moment, he felt something new. He wasn't just protecting strangers anymore. He was protecting life. Innocent, fragile, and full of hope. Outside, the forest grew quiet again, but the silence no longer felt peaceful. Felt like the breath before the storm. He knew the hunters would return, and next time they wouldn't just pass by. The signs were clear. Pursuit had begun. And now he had to decide whether he would hide, run, or fight. The forest outside was calm again, but the man's heart still carried the echo of danger. He sat near the fire, his iron bar leaning against the wall, ready though useless. The alien mother lay against the rug, her child pressed close to her chest. Their glow softened as the baby slept, filling the room with a strange, gentle light. For hours, the man sat silently, his mind wrestling with fear and questions. Why were they here? Why was she running? And why had she chosen his door out of all places? He knew the answers wouldn't come easily, but he also knew something else. He couldn't turn them away. Not now. Not after last night. The woman stirred. She opened her eyes slowly, looking around the room. Her gaze landed on him, and she watched carefully, as if measuring his heart through his eyes. He stood awkwardly, unsure what to do, then offered her a cup of water. She hesitated, then reached out with trembling hands and drank. Her lips formed soft sounds, a language he could not understand. But her eyes said more than words. They said thank you. The baby woke soon after, its tiny cry filling the room. The man moved quickly, nervous but determined, dipping a cloth in warm milk and offering it again. This time, the mother watched closely. At first, her body tensed, fear flashing in her eyes. But when she saw the child drink and calm down, her shoulders softened. She looked at him again, this time with something more than gratitude. It was trust, still fragile but real. The man smiled faintly, though he rarely smiled at all. "You'll be all right," he murmured. Not sure why he spoke aloud when they couldn't understand him, yet the words felt right, like a promise. The hours of daylight passed slowly. He tried to show her his home, pointing at simple things. A chair, the fire, bread, water. She listened, repeating some of his words in her strange accent, her voice soft and musical despite her weakness. He realized she was trying. Even though their languages were different, she wanted to connect. That effort touched him deeply. At one point, The baby crawled weakly toward him, small hands reaching out. The mother watched nervously, but she did not stop it. The child climbed into his lap, glowing faintly like a star. He froze, unsure, but the baby's laughter, small and pure, broke through his fear. He looked at the mother, and she nodded once, her eyes gentle. In that moment, he understood. She was allowing him into their circle, their fragile family. Later, as night began to fall again, the danger outside returned to his thoughts. He sat by the window, watching the forest grow darker, the shadows deepening. The mother crawled closer, her baby in her arms. She touched his shoulder lightly, startling him. When he turned, she pointed to the window, then made a gesture, 2 fingers walking, then stopping. He understood. She wanted him to know they couldn't keep running forever. He shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered. "You're safe here." She didn't know the words, but she seemed to feel the meaning. She touched her chest with her free hand, then touched his arm. A simple act, but it carried more weight than any speech. It was her way of saying she trusted him, even in the face of fear. As the baby fell asleep again, the man found himself speaking, not for her understanding but for his own heart. He told them about his life, how he had lived alone for years, how silence had been his only companion, how he thought nothing would ever change. He laughed softly at himself, realizing he was confessing secrets to someone who didn't even know his language. But still, it felt easier to speak in their presence than it had with any human in years. The woman listened quietly, her head tilted, her eyes never leaving his face. Even without knowing the words, she seemed to understand the loneliness in his voice. And in her eyes, he saw a reflection of the same thing. Loneliness, fear, and the heavy burden of carrying a child through danger with no one to help. For the first time, he felt they were not so different after all. Outside, the forest remained silent, but he knew danger still waited. The machines would return. The hunters would not give up. But now, as he looked at the fragile mother and her child, he felt a fire inside him. It wasn't just duty anymore. It was something stronger, a bond. That night, the house was no longer just his. It had become their shelter, their fragile sanctuary. And he was no longer just a man hiding from the world. He was a protector, bound not by blood, but by choice. The trust had been given. The bond had been made. And he knew he could not let them down. The night was darker than before, heavy with silence. The man sat near the window, his hand tight around the iron bar. His eyes stayed fixed on the forest. The alien mother and her child were asleep near the fire, their faint glow the only light in the room. He should have felt comfort in their presence, but instead his chest grew heavier with every passing minute. He knew danger was close. Then it came. A hum rolled through the trees, louder than ever. The sound carried power, steady and sharp, like machines breathing. The man froze. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might wake the child. Slowly, he leaned toward the window. There, between the trees, blue lights flickered. Cold, unnatural, moving in perfect lines. Shadows followed them, tall and sharp. Figures. At first, he thought they were men in strange armor. But as the lights grew closer, he saw metal shining where skin should be. Tall machines with glowing eyes, walking silently over the ground. They were not human soldiers. They were hunters. The alien mother stirred. Her eyes opened, and the moment she heard the hum, fear filled her face. She clutched her baby close, whispering soft words into its small ears. The child whimpered but did not cry. Somehow, even the little one sensed the danger waiting outside. The man stepped back from the window. His palms were damp, his grip weak on the iron bar. How could he stand against machines like these? They were built for one purpose, finding her. And once they found her, they would not stop. A beam of light swept across the house, sharp and white. It cut through the cracks of the wooden walls, flashing across the floor. The mother gasped softly, pressing herself against the wall with the baby hidden under her arms. The man crouched low, his back against the door, holding his breath. The light moved slowly across the walls, scanning, searching. For a moment he thought it would pass. But then, another sound came. A metallic click, like a lock breaking. His blood froze. They weren't just scanning. They were closing in. The mother's wide eyes met his, desperate and pleading. She whispered something quickly, shaking her head, but he couldn't understand. Still, he knew what she meant. They will come inside. The first bang came against the door. A deep, heavy strike that shook the old wood. The baby cried, its glow flaring brighter in fear. The man stood quickly, pressing his body against the door, as if his weight alone could keep it closed. Another strike followed, harder this time, the hinges groaning. Dust fell from the frame. The machines outside were testing the strength of his home. He turned to her, whispering, "Stay back. Hide." She didn't know the words, but she understood. She pulled herself into the shadows near the fire, holding the child close to her chest. The baby's cries grew softer, muffled against her trembling arms. Another bang. The door cracked. The man's body trembled, but he did not move away. He raised the iron bar in his hand, his knuckles white. He had no plan, no chance of winning. But leaving them unprotected was not an option. His life had been empty for years, and now he had something worth standing for. The door splintered. A sliver of cold blue light pierced the room. Through the crack, he saw the glowing eye of a hunter, sharp, unblinking, scanning. It made a sound, low and mechanical, and the banging grew faster. The house shook under the force. The alien mother buried her face against the child, her body shaking. Tears glistened in her glowing eyes. The man's heart broke at the sight, but it also hardened his resolve. If they wanted her, they would have to go through him first. The next strike nearly tore the door off its hinges. Splinters flew across the floor. He raised the iron bar higher, his breath sharp and heavy. He whispered to himself, "Not tonight, not here." The hunters outside stopped suddenly. Silence fell again, thick and unnatural. He held his breath, sweat dripping from his forehead. Why had they stopped? Were they waiting? Were they planning something worse? Then slowly the hum faded. The blue light pulled back, moving away from the house. He rushed to the window, peering through the gap. The machines glided back into the forest, their lights fading until the darkness swallowed them completely. But the silence that followed was not victory. It was warning. They had found something. They had tested the walls. And they would return. The man collapsed against the wall, the iron bar falling from his trembling hands. His chest heaved with heavy breaths. Behind him, the mother rose, her baby still pressed tightly in her arms. She looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Then, slowly, she placed her hand on his shoulder. No words passed between them, but the meaning was clear. He had stood for them. He had not surrendered. And now, she trusted him with their lives more than ever. But he knew the truth. Tonight had only been the beginning. The hunters had appeared, and they would not stop until they took what they came for. The house was quiet again, but it was not peace. The man knew silence after the hunter's visit was only a pause, not safety. He sat by the broken door, his hand still shaking from holding the iron bar. Splinters covered the floor, and the smell of burned metal lingered in the air where the hunter's light had touched the wood. His heart pounded with the memory of their glowing eyes staring through the crack. The alien mother sat near the fire, holding her baby close. Her body was trembling, but her eyes never left the man. They were full of questions and fear, but also something more, hope. She had no one else, nowhere else to go. For her, he was the last line between life and death. The baby whimpered softly, glowing faintly against her chest. She rocked it gently, humming a strange tune, a melody that sounded both sad and beautiful. The man listened quietly, his chest heavy. He had never been needed by anyone before. For years, he had lived in silence, hiding from the world. But now, 2 lives depended on him, and the choice before him could no longer be avoided. Should he give them up and save himself? Or should he fight, even if it meant losing everything? The hum returned before he could answer. Louder, closer, heavier. He rushed to the window and saw them. More hunters this time, moving in lines through the forest, their blue lights brighter, their shadows longer. This was no patrol. This was a capture. They were coming straight for his house. The mother gasped, clutching her baby tighter. She tried to stand, but her legs gave way. The man hurried to her side, helping her up. She pointed to the back of the house, whispering words in her strange language, her tone urgent. He understood enough. She wanted him to run with them. He shook his head. Running into the forest would be suicide. The hunters were faster, stronger, and they already surrounded them. He looked into her wide, frightened eyes and knew the truth. The only way forward was to fight. He grabbed the iron bar again, then pulled a heavy wooden chair against the broken door. It wouldn't stop the machines, but it would slow them down. He scanned the room, searching for anything useful. His hands found old tools, a hammer, a rusty saw, a box of nails. Useless against metal soldiers, but maybe, just maybe, he could use the house itself as a weapon. The hum grew louder, shaking the glass in the windows. Lights swept across the yard, casting sharp beams into the night. Shadows moved across the walls. The baby began to cry, louder this time, its glow flaring brighter. The mother rocked it desperately, whispering fast, her eyes wet with fear. The man crouched beside them, his hand firm on her shoulder. "You're safe," he said softly, though his voice trembled. "I'll keep you safe." She didn't know the words, but she felt them. Her eyes filled with tears, and she touched his chest with her trembling hand, as if giving him her final trust. The first bang hit the door harder than before. The chair slid back, the wood splintering. The man tightened his grip on the iron bar. His jaw clenched. Another bang shook the walls. The baby wailed. The mother pressed herself against the corner, covering the child with her body. The man's eyes burned with fear, but beneath it, something else rose, anger. He had lived in silence too long, letting the world pass him by. But now, standing here, he realized he could not stay silent anymore. He had been given a choice. Step aside and let cruelty win, or stand and fight for something greater than himself. He chose to fight. The door burst open, wood flying in every direction. A hunter stepped through, its glowing eyes scanning, its metal arms reaching. The man roared, swinging the iron bar with all his strength. Crashed against the machine's head, sparks flying. The hunter staggered, but did not fall. Another step forward, another strike. The man swung again, his arms burning with pain, his body shaking. The hunter raised its arm to strike back, but the man ducked, driving the iron bar into its chest. Sparks erupted, the machine crackling before falling back through the doorway. The sound echoed into the night, but more were coming. The man dragged the heavy table against the doorframe, blocking it as best he could. He rushed to the window, smashing the glass with the iron bar, then used the broken edges to wedge sharp wooden stakes he had nailed together. A trap. Primitive, desperate, but maybe enough to slow them down. The hum outside grew deafening now. Blue lights filled the yard. Shadows of more hunters stretched across the ground. The man turned back to the mother and child. Their eyes were wide, filled with fear but also with something else, belief. They believed in him. He stood tall, breathing heavily, sweat dripping from his brow. His voice was steady now, stronger than before. "They won't take you," he whispered. The baby's cry softened, as if it understood. The mother pressed her hand to his arm, nodding weakly. The door shook again, harder this time, the wood screaming under the pressure. The hunters were seconds away from breaking through. The man raised his iron bar, standing between the door and the fragile family behind him. He was no soldier, no hero, but in that moment he was their shield. The choice had been made. The broken door lay on the ground, half burned and half shattered. Smoke rose from the yard where 2 hunters had fallen, sparks still glowing faintly from their broken bodies. The man stood in the middle of the small room, his chest heaving, his hands bruised and bleeding from the fight. The iron bar was bent, blackened at the edges, but still in his grip. Inside, silence finally returned. Not the silence of fear, but the silence after survival. The alien mother sat in the corner, clutching her baby tightly. Her face was pale, her body weak, but her eyes glowed with something new. Gratitude, relief, hope. The man turned to her slowly. His breath was heavy, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his gaze was steady. He had chosen to stand, and against all odds he had survived. More importantly, he had kept them safe. The baby stirred, glowing softly, no longer crying. It looked at him with wide, curious eyes. Tiny hands reached out, as if calling him closer. He hesitated, his body aching, but he stepped forward anyway. The child touched his chest with its small fingers, and in that simple touch, the man felt something break inside him. A wall he had built for years, the wall of loneliness, was gone. The mother's lips trembled as she whispered something in her language. He could not understand her words, but he could feel their meaning. Her tone was soft, filled with emotion. She was thanking him, giving him a piece of her trust he had never thought he could earn. He shook his head. "You don't owe me," he said quietly. But still, her eyes held on to his, and he knew she would never forget. The night dragged on. He patched the door as best as he could, blocking it with wood and nails, though he knew it would not hold against another attack. But the forest outside remained quiet. The hunters were gone, at least for now. Perhaps they had failed enough times to retreat, or perhaps they would return with greater force. He didn't know. What he did know was that he couldn't stay here anymore. As dawn broke, the first light of morning spilled into the room, touching the three of them together. The mother rose slowly, her body still weak, and came closer. She placed the baby gently into his arms. He froze, staring down at the small glowing child. Its tiny head rested against his chest, and he felt its warmth seep into him. He looked up at her in confusion, but she only nodded, her expression firm. She was telling him something without words. He was part of their lives now. He was no longer just a stranger who had opened his door. He was family. For years, the man had lived in silence, convinced he had no place in the world. But now, holding the child, feeling the trust of its mother, he understood. He had been waiting for this moment, for these lives to walk into his. The road ahead would be dangerous. He knew the hunters were not gone forever. He knew protecting them would require more than an iron bar and a wooden house. But for the first time in his life, he felt ready. Not because he was strong, but because he had a reason. He looked at the woman and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Her eyes glistened with tears, and she nodded once more. She placed her hand over his, wrapping it gently around the baby. Together, they stood in the ruined house, surrounded by broken wood and scattered sparks, yet somehow stronger than before. The baby stirred again, laughing softly for the first time since it had arrived at his door. The sound filled the small house with light, more powerful than fire, more comforting than silence. The man smiled, a real smile that reached his tired eyes. The hunters might return. The world might never understand. But it didn't matter. That night, in the ashes of fear, something new had been born. A bond stronger than blood. A promise that no matter what came, they would face it together. The man, the alien mother, and her child were no longer strangers. They were a family,